Have you as a Christian ever been told that you shouldn't be angry about something, even if what you were angry about was completely unjust? Have you ever seen people use phrases like, anger is sinful, or turn the other cheek, or Jesus is all about love, used to try to justify the idea that anger is inherently wrong and that Christians should be pacifists? Christians who believe that anger is a sin frequently cite the passage James 1:20, where it says, "The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." However, they miss the fact that the Bible distinguishes between righteous anger and sinful anger. So we can see in Ephesians 4:26, which says, "Be angry and do not sin." Why is the Bible telling us to be angry, but also saying not to sin in the same sentence? Clearly, anger and sin are not inherently tied together. And this makes complete sense, since anger is an emotion. It's natural. God gave us our emotions. Negative emotions like anger and sadness are like a check engine light for your life as a whole. They basically tell you whether or not something is wrong in your life. So because of that, it's important to feel these emotions, but just remember that you have control over whether or not you act on them or you express them. And is Jesus really all about love? While it's true that our God is love, he is overflowing in abundant love. Trying to portray him as a doormat who just lets people walk all over him and never gets angry gives us a incorrect, one-dimensional view of who God actually is. We can see that Jesus expressed righteous anger on several occasions. The most striking example would be the one in John 2:14 through 16, where we can see that Jesus had seen people turn a temple into a market, and he was overcome by righteous anger. He made a whip out of cords and drove the people and their cattle out of the market, and then overturned tables and yelled at people who were selling doves. We can also see many of Jesus' interactions with the Pharisees are clearly exhibiting righteous anger, where he says things that are pretty insulting. We can also look in the Old Testament and see that God, many times, he gets very angry at the people of Israel over the fact that they're just being constantly unfaithful to him. Numbers 11:10 says, "Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled." The context around this verse is that the Israelites had got tired of the manna that God was giving them. And manna is like a kind of food that God made grow in the desert for them. They got so sick of it that they started demanding meat because that's all they were eating. Because of that, they were like wailing and crying about how it would have been better if God had just left them to slavery in Egypt, and they were being extremely ungrateful. Later in Numbers, it actually even says that God said to Moses, "How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the signs that I performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they." Fortunately, Moses prayed for the Israelites, and God ended up sparing them. But it's very clear from these verses that God does feel anger, and that anger in certain circumstances is justified. Anger is justified in circumstances where evil is being perpetrated, or when people are just being constantly and consistently unjust. And as Christians, should we really just turn the other cheek? People usually cite Matthew 5:39 to justify this idea. They're basically trying to say like, oh, this verse shows that we should be pacifist whenever someone, because basically what the verse says is whenever someone slaps you, just turn your other cheek so they can slap you again. But the context of this verse shows us that this is referring to personal vengeance, not systemic injustices or any kind of moral corruption. Basically, if you're in an argument with someone and they slap you, don't slap them back. But it's not saying that we as Christians should never be angry or never be willing to fight for what we believe in. It's important to remember that being vengeful in your personal life is a form of sinful anger, not righteous anger. In conclusion, it's essential to understand that as Christians, righteous anger is not something that is sinful. It's something that is even sometimes necessary in certain circumstances. The Bible makes a clear distinction between sinful anger and righteous anger. We are called to feel and acknowledge our emotions, which are things that are natural and inborn to us from God. But we are also called to act righteous and never let our anger overtake us to the point of being sinful or being vengeful. Righteous anger isn't about personal vengeance. It's about standing against evil and injustice in a way that honors God. So rather than suppressing your anger and just trying to be like a nice guy, instead use it as a driving force to push you towards justice. Now that you understand why righteous anger is not just okay, but actually justified in certain circumstances, the question comes, should Christian men be aggressive? Like, is aggression something that as Christian men that we should embrace? Or is that something that's not okay? I have a video where I very clearly explain which is the case. If you're interested, go check that out.